Welcome to the regular meeting of the Environmental and Utilities Commission, August 14, 2017. At this moment, we'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to address the commission should fill out the request to speak form and present it to the clerk.
I believe Mayor Cabaldon would like to.
All right.
Excuse me, did he fill out a form?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm Christopher Kowalda. I'm the mayor here. Wanted to talk to you about the Mayor's Challenge, which we've issued, and I'm visiting with each of the commissions briefly at the beginning of their meetings to talk about this project and initiative that we're engaged in. That Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City and probably America's leading philanthropist when it comes to municipal innovation in America, has issued a $250 million pledge for helping cities lead the country in providing better services, but in a variety of solving a variety of social issues and problems and challenges and opportunities as well. Included in that is the Mayor's Challenge. And 5 years ago, Bloomberg Philanthropies issued the first of the Mayor's Challenges, and they've been here in the U.S. Then they've been going around the world doing Mayor's Challenges in Europe and South America. They're back to the United States this year with the Mayor's Challenge again. The Mayor's Challenge essentially is to reward the best idea for city innovation in America, or the best ideas, and then provide not trivial monetary support to help advance those ideas towards implementation, ultimately with the notion of scaling them and replicating across America. In 2012, the city of West Sacramento competed in that challenge. We were one of the very few small cities to compete in that challenge, and we did so in part because we wanted to win, although we didn't think we would. We wanted to win, but we also wanted to immerse ourselves in a process and culture of innovation, and to try to steer the ship slightly differently. And we have done that as a result of that challenge. We started to build our capacity and our chops and our reputation and our expectations of ourselves. It may sound odd locally, but nationally we're actually seen as one of the most innovative cities in the country along a variety of dimensions. In 2012, we submitted a proposal in the Mayor's Challenge based on a process that we'd undergone in the city that we called game storming. We brought together some key change makers in the community, private companies, nonprofit organizations, public agencies, and others to help us cook up an idea. At that time, this was in 2012 or 13, I had just announced in the State of the City address a couple of months earlier that West Sacramento was intending to become a global food hub. Also, if you were local, they're like, that's crazy, but that is now, we're now pretty largely recognized as a global food hub. But at that time, we decided to use that launch board to focus our innovation challenge ideas around food innovation in particular. And so the folks that we brought together were from the Center for Land-Based Learning, who we didn't even know at the time, the Food Bank, UC Davis, Raley's, Farm Fresh to You, a variety of folks who sat with us and ideated, used a lot of butcher paper coming with ideas in the municipal lane around food innovation. That process produced a whole bunch of really interesting ideas and also changed our web of relationships in the city around not just the city, but other folks who make change happen. The top three ideas at that time, one was called the Grow-Tel, and the notion of the Grow-Tel was that we would take an existing motel on West Capitol Avenue. We have a surplus of motels given the amount of demand for tourists and business and other travelers, so we have a surplus on West Capitol Avenue we have since the 40s, or since the 50s, since the highway was constructed. So we said, what if we converted one of these motels, took its parking lot and its public spaces and could use that, converted that into an urban farm, but provided some of the existing hotel space as housing for the farmer that would be, or the farmers that would be using that urban farm. That was informed by the reports that we had had from UC Davis and the Center for Land-Based Learning that one of the biggest problems in the community was the lack of folks going into farming, or folks that were training to become farmers, unlike the generations before where you trained to be a farmer because your parents were a farmer, you trained with them, and then you inherited the farm. In the new model, folks who never farmed before wanted to learn how to farm, but then when they finished the training, they had no capital and no land. And so the point of our Grotel proposal was to provide affordable housing for farmers and an initial place for those urban farmers to be developing their relationships with banks and restaurants and schools and others in terms of what they were selling. So it was a good example of how we were trying to solve a challenge of West Capitol redevelopment, revitalization, the agriculture pipeline as being one of the most significant cities anchoring the agricultural industry in the region, and also providing a greater access to produce and a better connection to the production of food in our community. So we're trying to solve multiple problems with one proposal. The second one was a ridiculously crazy idea. We said, well, we have all these food deserts in the community, where families don't have easy and affordable access to fresh produce. So that's a major problem. We're also home to Farm Fresh to You, which is the state's largest at-scale distributor of CSA boxes, essentially, where a box of produce comes to you on a weekly basis or some other regular schedule. We said, what if we could do that? What if we could get to every single house? Maybe we could, with a box system like that. And Farm Fresh, as you said, that's not really our business model. We don't know if we could pull that off. We thought, well, who else could do that? Who else could go to every single house in the city every week? And we thought, well, we do that. We do that with refuse and recycling. Paulina wasn't here because she would have thrown cold water on it. She was actually, but we go to every house. What if we tacked a trailer onto the waste management truck or something else? And while we were picking stuff up, we actually left a box of fresh produce that we could buy at really, really attractive rates if we're buying for 55,000 people at a time. Serve everyone universally, and provide a very, very reliable market for farmers in our area in terms of someone to buy on a reliable basis their produce. So again, we're trying to solve multiple problems in terms of the ag markets, food deserts, all at once. We didn't propose that one because we didn't think we could actually implement it within the 2-year period that the Bloomberg Challenge insisted on. Then the third one, and the one that we did submit, was a program called Farm to Fast Food, and this was another motel conversion proposal, and this was to convert a motel or something like a Hefty Burgers at the time into a incubator for restaurants. Now, it's not quite an urban legend because it's actually quite true. Almost everyone knows the lady down the street that sells tamales and wants to start a restaurant of her own. And in some cities, there are formal incubators. San Francisco is a great example of this, that have programs and places for micro entrepreneurs to get their start in the restaurant industry. It's almost impossible to do so otherwise because to serve food in any kind of commercial way, you have to have a licensed commercial kitchen, and the cost of such a thing at the time was $500,000. So that the woman selling tamales down the street cannot get capital for a $500,000 commercial kitchen and quit whatever job she has or the 2 jobs that she has to do it. So just she can never break out, and we don't get the tamales. So part of the point of this incubator plan under Farm to Fast Food was to create a place where she could have access to the commercial kitchen, and Tuesday nights would be her night in order to try out the restaurant she'd always wanted to open. Only Tuesday. She doesn't have to worry about keeping a restaurant open 7 days a week. She can keep her regular job or jobs and try this out and use that kitchen. And then someone else would be on Wednesday, doing some other form of food. And food could be grown on site, same urban farm concept. And the final leg of this was we would focus exclusively on those micro-entrepreneur restaurateurs that were going to be producing healthy food and convenient food, because the feedback we were getting from residents was, look, we both we're a two-parent family, or two-parent family. I get home late, we both get home late. There's no time, and so we end up stopping and picking up really unhealthy fast food. If there was an option, we would take advantage of it. So again, we were trying to solve multiple problems with the opportunities and the assets that we did have, but serious problems in the community and exploiting some important opportunities. So that's what we submitted. It got great. We didn't win. you would know if we had won the national, the National Bloomberg Challenge. We didn't win. We got really good feedback from both Bloomberg and others that this was exactly in the lane. No small city won that year. I think the smallest city was 150 or 180,000 people. I kind of threw a tantrum. This time, they've made it clear that they're looking for innovation at all sizes of cities, and particularly cities that look like the rest of America. Right? Most of America is not Chicago and LA and New York that have 27 people, mayor's offices of innovation. Most cities are like ours, so they're looking for innovations. They are looking at Chicago and Boston and others too, but they are looking specifically for cities like ours that can show how things, innovative, important social impacts can be achieved in cities at this scale. So we're competing. The winner of the Bloomberg Challenge gets $5 million to implement their idea. The other finalists, I think there are 4 other finalists for the Bloomberg for the challenge, and they each get $1 million for the same purpose. Along the way, 35 cities are chosen early stage for what are called City Champions Awards. They'll get $100,000 to do testing and building out of their ideas along the way towards the finals. The deadline for the submission of the innovation ideas is October, I want to say 20th, but it's the latter part of October. Round of 35 will be announced in January, and then we'll proceed further down the line. Late October sounds like it's a long time away. It's not. It's very fast, given what we need to do in order to come up with great ideas, engage non-traditional folks in this process, and then actually work on the ideas, because putting boxes of food on the back of a garbage truck was a great idea, but what we realized after scoping it out was that's something we could work on if we had 5 years. It's not something we could do in 2, so we also need time to actually look at the implementation plan for any such idea. So we have just launched last week the public solicitation for these proposals. At the beginning of last week, we had a leadership meeting with the directors of the departments and the leadership of the city's various commissions. Your Commissioner Leonard was there on your behalf to scope out some of the major buckets of focus that we have in the challenge. If you've been already to our website, if you go to the city's website at citywestsacramento.org, it's the big link. There's a picture of me with a broken neck talking about this program. But we've tried to create a set of focus areas for the challenge, not as specific as food innovation alone, which is what we did last time, but also not anything at all. And so if you look at the survey and the website, you'll see the areas of focus that we have, but they are largely aligned to Measure E. Because that's where we have both resources and needs that are intense, and they're where we have lots of folks already working and trying to come up with ideas. So Measure E, you'll recall, deals with things like homelessness, the impact of homelessness and reducing homelessness. It deals with the Kids Home Run and preschool and internships and college and college savings accounts. It deals with technology and smart cities and civic engagement and age-friendly communities. It deals with public safety. It also deals with road rehabilitation, although that's not one of our focus areas. Sorry, Denix. So the area is largely in line with Measure E, and in addition with ideas and concepts that deal with how do we make the city more effective in its services, more efficient in its services, and in the way that it deals with citizens as primarily as customers, citizens and others as customers. And so that bucket's not Measure E specific, but it's how can we get better, smarter, more efficient as a city in our daily work as well. So those are the focus areas. That's still a very large range of areas, but it is focused in those spaces. So the survey is out now to solicit public ideas. It's not the sort of thing you can go on the survey and fill it out in 1 minute, but it also doesn't take 5 days to do. So we want to encourage great ideas. We're not going for 1,000 ideas. We're going for a handful of great ones. If we get hundreds of fantastic ones, that's terrific. Following that process, we'll be convening another set of change makers in some of those areas like we did last time, nonprofits and businesses and others that are in that space. And then in addition to that, we'll be convening something akin to a hackathon or an ideas fest, where we'll be inviting folks with an innovation mindset and taking some of the ideas that are submitted through the public portal, and we'll be beating them up and reworking them and twisting them around and trying them again, to try to build out some, to take some ideas which are likely to be at a level 1 innovation and take them up 3 or 4 through that process. Then in September, late September, we'll narrow down our submission. The council will be taking a look at that at I think the very beginning of October for submission to Bloomberg Philanthropies. So I'm here because this is, we want to engage you as commissioners, both specifically in the area of, in the scope of work that the commission handles. And this is an area ripe for innovation. And your commission has, if Paulina hasn't told you, the council's review of the sewer master plan and the impact fees and the other elements that you have reviewed, your commission's really been a standout this year in terms of effectiveness and really digging in and providing the sort of citizen review, common sense look, but also developing the internal expertise to provide meaningful, impactful, useful policy guidance in that regard. We're hoping you'll do the same thing on this challenge and look at your own domain. And there's a lot of smart city work, for example, in the sewer and water field around how to use sewer and water better, how to deal with infrastructure questions, how to deal with some of the things that might have the potential of reducing some of the impact fees and the monthly fees that I know you've had the same concerns that we have had in terms of keeping those low. So definitely within the scope of the space that you're in, but also as civic leaders, as part of the city's leadership team, to help to think even beyond the scope of the commission and to engage others as well in that process. We are looking for real innovation in an innovation sense, not just some new ideas or more things to do. We have lots to do in the city already, so we're not looking for additional activities per se. So I'll stop in a second and ask if you have any questions, or feedback. But we really want to stay in that space of what are really interesting ways to transform the problem. To rethink the mix of opportunities in ways that are different. You don't win the Bloomberg Challenge just by doing something that everyone else is doing or that you've already been doing. In fact, you're ineligible for that. It has to be in the space of real compelling innovation. It won't be things like we should add sidewalks, on Jefferson near the high school, right? That's not an innovation. That's just spending money on something money we don't have, but it's just spending money. We know what sidewalks do. We know how they work. We know what their effectiveness is. The country will not learn anything from us installing sidewalks on Jefferson. And so those sorts of projects won't work. Building a new park or some other capital project mostly is not going to qualify for the award. I could imagine a couple of kinds of capital projects that would work, but that's going to be very much the exception. So that's one area where I'm encouraging folks, don't waste your time or ours coming up with proposals for that sort of thing. Similarly, things that just are going to cost us more money on a permanent basis. This is about making government more effective, but also more efficient. We have essentially zero discretionary money in city government, less than we had during the recession, actually. So our ability to say, hey, let's have a fantastic new program that will do whatever, a soccer ball for every child or whatever, and see what that does in terms of inspiration. We don't have the money to continue to do that. If we get $5 million, we buy soccer balls for everybody in the community. What do we do the next year? So one of the filters that we're applying is if it's going to cost the city government more into the future, it's not something we will submit, both because of the challenge criteria, but also because we can't sustain it. We're looking for ideas that will bring other resources to the table, don't cost money, or that will support themselves on an ongoing basis. And by support themselves, I mean really support themselves. And so ideas like this, if you propose to us, let's buy soccer balls for everyone in the community because having a soccer ball will mean that a child is more likely to stay in school and therefore not go to prison, and we've saved money on prison. The city doesn't run the prisons, so if we spend all of our money on the soccer ball and all the savings goes to the state from the prison system, it still doesn't work, right? So it might be a good social thing, it might be a great outcome for the community, but just the balance sheet has to work for the city and the city's taxpayers too. And so the benefits and the costs we will account for, but they need to be part of what the municipal strategy looks like. So I hope you'll engage in this process. I'm encouraging folks to really dive into this for real. Spend time with other people. In particular, get out of silos. If you work in the sewer space, maybe focus your innovation ideas around preschool or something else, and not the thing that you know the most about, but really take a chance to step out of that. Use other lenses. I often encourage folks to say, okay, if you think homelessness is the #1 problem, don't start just with the problem. Like, what could we do about the problem of homelessness? Because what you tend to do then is to start to think of it in the terms that it already is, in the people and the resources and the problems that are already there. If you instead say, let's see, the Netflix has decided their big play is going to be solving homelessness with their platform. If you were and you're advising the Netflix board of directors, how are we going to use Netflix to solve homelessness? What would you say? Right, so you're like, wait, what? So if you spend an hour thinking about that, okay, we're going to use their rating system this way, and we're going to use this matching system this way, we're going to use their distribution system this way. It forces you to think about a problem in a completely different way. How would Uber solve the problem of sewer rates going up faster than we would like? Right. So if you step out of your world, jump the shark and go into a different silo. If I can use three metaphors all in one sentence. It will lead to much better kinds of innovation that will actually not just get the attention that the ideas are going to need to have, but actually have the potential of changing the outcomes that we're so interested in achieving. So that's some background on the challenge. Commissioner Leonard knows quite a bit about it from the leadership meeting that we had. But if you have any questions or if you have any instant feedback or you think this is all crazy, well, even if you think it is all crazy, I'm happy to answer or have some feedback.
Any questions, concerns, feedback? One question that I had is the last 2 times that you guys tried, the city tried for it, why were the motels involved in it?
Well, so it was just one time. This is
Okay.
the second challenge now. And the motels are actually, in some sense, they're a good example of approaching innovation from Bloomberg Philanthropies really urges cities to focus on picking the toughest problems and the hardest problems, and we are doing that. That's why you see homelessness on our list and the skills gap and some of the others. My own sense, though, is that a problem-based, an exclusively problem-based approach to innovation leaves you pretty short of finding compelling ideas. That you also need to be looking just as much for what are the untapped assets, what are the opportunities, what are the emerging trends and things in society that we could apply, and then where would they work? Right, what can we actually use them for? So the motels are an example of a stranded asset that we have, that we just have too many. In the same sense that we have too many vacant and abandoned lots in the city, in the urban part of the city, in the older neighborhoods of the city, that because they're vacant for 10 years or 12 years, they attract illicit activities and what have you. So we said when we started our urban farming program in the city, one of the reasons we were doing that wasn't because urban farming was the most important issue in the city, but that urban farming would help farmers, it would help deal with the food deserts, and it would occupy those lots, of which we had too many. So in the case of the motels, it's similar in the sense of, okay, this is an asset that we have that is currently not really it's not being used to its full potential. Yeah. In that sense, so thinking about some of the problems that way, even in the city, okay, we have all these breweries and tap rooms. How could we use them to solve the challenge of the skills gap between biotechnology companies and our workforce in the city? I don't know what the answer is, but maybe there's a way, right? So if you force yourself into really hard questions that make no sense, but really live in them and dig in them for a little bit of time, they can lead to some of the most inspired innovation concepts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 1B, Commissioner Communications. Jennifer, do we have any?
No.
All right, so we'll move on to item number 2, consideration of the approval of the minutes of June 12, 2007 Environment and Utilities Commission.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
And Everyone else is in agreement?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so now we move on to the regular agenda items. Item number 3, presentation and discussion of the status of the storm drainage and stormwater master plan update.
Hi there. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and commission members. My name is Wendy Williams. I'm a senior civil engineer in the Development Engineering Division of the Community Development Department. So this item tonight will be your first look at the storm drainage and stormwater master plan that is currently underway. As I go through the presentation, I'll give you an overview of the master plan itself, and then I'll highlight a few issues that we're currently working through with our consultant to see if you have any comments or suggestions for us. So, as you all know, the city's largest construction project to date is well underway, and that project will reduce the flooding risk by upgrading the levee along the eastern side of Southport. However, the city is also susceptible to flooding, not only from levee failures, but also from our own internal drainage system. So not only from levee failures, but also blockages and capacity issues and other concerns related to that internal system. Unfortunately, not enough is known about our internal drainage system to adequately identify those vulnerabilities and deficiencies. So to remedy that situation, the city entered into a contract with Wood Rogers in November of 2016 to focus on the internal drainage system of the city and its components, and to complete its first citywide storm drainage and stormwater master plan. The master plan will combine the existing Southport drainage master plan with all previous technical memos, large-scale drainage plans, and condition and capacity information for the internal drainage system into one citywide master plan. The main goals of the master plan are to guide development with respect to drainage, especially in areas that are primed for development, including the Bridge District, Southport, and the Washington neighborhood, as well as to establish a capital improvement project list of facilities that need upgraded or modified to address various deficiencies, including things like lack of storage, undersized facilities, poor facility condition, that sort of thing. In order to complete the master plan, we need specifics regarding the internal drainage system. So unlike Southport, which has had a drainage master plan since 1995, the north area has never been subject to a drainage master plan. Also, there's a lot of missing data on the drainage system in the north area. For that reason, the contract with Wood Rogers includes field surveys, including size, capacity, and condition information for the majority of the storm drain facilities in the north area, including major channels, ditches, culverts, pipes, manholes, city pump stations. The data that we gather will be incorporated into the city's GIS system by the consultant's team. Similar information is already incorporated into the city's GIS system for Southport, primarily since a significant amount of the city improvements in Southport have been completed within the last 20 years. So we've been keeping up with that for the last 20 years. So because runoff from any particular parcel in the city may travel through facilities that are owned and maintained by non-city entities, for instance, RD 900, Caltrans, RD 537, this master plan needs some information on non-city facilities to assess the condition of the overall system. So consequently, we are also surveying the detention basins in Southport, which are non-city owned. Actually, there is one basin that is city owned, which is Bridgeway Lakes. Current stormwater requirements from the city's municipal separate storm sewer system, that's the MS4 permit, among other things, includes installation of full trash capture devices or other programs which will reduce trash and stormwater runoff. As far as that goes, you'll hear more about that project in a subsequent item tonight. Another item, which is a stormwater requirement, is also inspection and maintenance of features such as bioswales, drain inlet filters, pavers, especially where those are located within city right-of-way or city easements. Therefore, the master plan will incorporate stormwater requirements to the extent that they overlap drainage requirements. A financing study is not included with this current contract, but a separate contract will be executed once we have initial results. The financing study will update the existing drainage impact fees from the Southport Drainage Master Plan, and it will also explore opportunities and options to pay for capital projects, as well as ongoing operations and maintenance for storm drain and associated stormwater facilities. Some of the current milestones for the master plan project are that we will have a draft model for city review in probably October, November of 2017. Between November of 2017 and early 2018, we'll be developing the list of facilities that need to be upgraded or modified. In early 2018, we should be receiving the final model, and spring we'll be looking at draft master plan for review, and hopefully finish up with the final master plan sometime in mid-2018. So that's the overview of the master plan itself. Now we'd like to look at a few of the issues that we're working through with our consultant. So the master plan will have two separate models, one for the north area and one for Southport, because they are hydraulically separated from each other. Drainage from one has nothing to do with drainage from the other. Those two models for the master plan will simulate surface runoff as it moves through the internal drainage system to the outfall locations. Runoff predictions for the models are heavily influenced by at least three factors. One would be rainfall predictions, second would be soil infiltration, and the third would be the assumed amount of imperviousness of the land. So we'll look at each one of those just really briefly. The model for the master plan update will utilize what we call an XP Swim software, which is a common software for this type of modeling. Embedded in that software is design rainfall from Sacramento County based on pre-1992 rainfall data. So our consultant works closely with Sacramento County on other projects, and Sacramento County knows that they really need to update that design rainfall. And they said they're going to do that in the near future, but they won't give a determinate time frame for that to happen. Conversely, our consultant has also worked with the City of Woodland and Yolo County to develop a Yolo County city-county drainage manual where they estimated design rainfall based on 2009 data. And so we will use the Yolo County rainfall data based on its direct applicability to our location and its more recent data. As far as soil infiltration goes, soil groups, along with their typical infiltrative values, are generally well documented geographically by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And this information is available for most of the land within West Sacramento. For those small areas that are not included, soil properties for the immediately adjacent properties will be used. So we feel pretty confident about our assumptions for rainfall and for soil infiltration. The last factor that will heavily impact runoff routing is impermeability or imperviousness, which is intrinsically tied to land use. So imperviousness is typically represented as a percentage of the overall land area. As an example, the city's published imperviousness value for low-density development is 30%, meaning that on average, low-density parcels should only be approximately 30% impervious. So the consultants team, as you can imagine, there are inherent risks associated with overestimating or underestimating the imperviousness percentages. So underestimating imperviousness, which would be assuming that the land had less hardscape than was actually constructed, could lead to undersized facilities and localized flooding, whereas the opposite assumption could lead to unnecessarily large facilities. For areas of future development, the land use and therefore the assumed impermeability is shown on the entire parcel to be developed and typically includes streets and rooftops and driveways and sidewalk. However, for areas that are already developed, the city's land use map has pulled out the streets and only shown the land use on the adjacent non-roadway parcels. So since the roadways are highly impermeable, we need to resolve this discrepancy between how we look at future development on a gross parcel, gross acreage basis versus how we look at existing development where we've pulled out the streets, so that we can provide consistency within our models. So our consultant performed a desktop analysis of a few different land use areas to compare the actual percentage of hardscape area in an existing development to our published values. And we considered both North Area and Southport and varying areas of varying age so that we could get a good sampling for those. And we came up with a composite imperviousness percentage significantly higher than our published values for both low density and medium density land uses. We looked at high density land uses as well, but those came out with a lower imperviousness value, but the sampling size was very small. So our consultant has recommended that for modeling purposes, our imperviousness percentages for low and medium density land uses be bumped up, be increased by about 25%. For modeling purposes only, so that would not be reflective of a global city standard change at this time. So that would increase the percentage from 30% to 55% for low density, and 40% would now be 65% for medium density. So we agree, city staff agrees with that interpretation and concurs with their findings, but we would be interested to know if the commission has any comments or suggestions on that as well. Our consultant also noticed that several of the land uses in our new general plan 2035 do not have published imperviousness values. So a few of them are new land use designations such as central business district, medium-high density residential, mixed corridor use, neighborhood mixed use. And it may be a challenge to come up with a single imperviousness value for those land uses, considering the varied actual uses that could develop on those land areas. One last impermeability topic to ponder is whether the city should consider further regulating imperviousness to ensure that our assumptions remain accurate and we therefore avoid over or undersizing facilities. So currently, new uses, new developments use the land use and imperviousness design criteria to design their drainage facilities. However, once the main infrastructure is in and constructed, there's no specific tracking of what happens after that. What happens if somebody adds to the hardscape so much that it changes the runoff significantly? We do have a way of making sure that doesn't happen for commercial, industrial, and multifamily lots. When they need to do something, they generally need to come in and get a permit from the Community Development Department. So development engineering looks at their drainage system in cases where it appears that it's going to change their runoff. So if they're adding a parking lot, or if they're adding additional building square footage, or they're adding hardscape, we work with the developer, and they upgrade and modify their drainage system to accommodate that. That doesn't happen for single-family residential lots. So for single-family residential lots, the owner could install hardscape or concrete pretty much at will, except under special circumstances. So one of those circumstances would be, say, the installation of a swimming pool. Did you have to come get a permit for installation of a swimming pool? And that generally includes the hardscape around the swimming pool, and that whole area then would be considered impervious. Another example is a limitation through the planning department where the front yard of a single-family lot must be no more than 50% impervious. That particular regulation is generally enforced through code enforcement after the fact, or in conjunction with some other approval for an improvement, say a secondary driveway. Other than that, owners of single-family lots may pour concrete or otherwise increase their impermeability without city oversight. So regulating the permeability of these lots through, say, hardscape permits or additional enforceable regulations or some other means could ensure that we maintain our permeability targets, which would help recharge groundwater and minimize the drainage infrastructure necessary to deal with the city's runoff. So commission discussion and comments on that topic would be helpful as well. A small discussion on funding, future funding. There is a difference between Southport and the north area that I'm sure you're starting to get a handle on. So since Southport, a significant amount of the Southport infrastructure was completed within the last 20 years, we have a good handle on that. During that time, they've been guided by the Southport Drainage Master Plan, which has shown what the Southport-wide deficiencies are and what the individual basin-wide deficiencies are. And as Southport has continued to build out, we look at them on a project-level basis and figure out, what improvements do you need to do because your project is adding to runoff. The Southport Drainage Master Plan also includes an impact fee program where applicable properties pay into the Southport drainage funds as they develop, and reimbursement is available to developers who put in infrastructure that serves more than just their project. And that's all through the impact fee program. Conversely, the north area has never had a drainage master plan. A significant amount of information is still missing with regard to our existing system in the north area. And you couple that with how the north area has developed as a lot-by-lot and project-by-project system. So we have mismatched drainage lines and pipe sizes and pipe materials and flow lines. And our outcome of that is a north area infrastructure that's reaching the end of its life cycle, partially due to a lack of scheduled maintenance because we haven't had that information. So analogous to the water and sewer master plans, our master plan project will come out with a list of upgrades and modifications and renovations that are necessary to maintain the system or increase the efficiency and capacity of the system where necessary. However, unlike the water and sewer master plans, the city has very little funding dedicated to stormwater and storm drainage facilities, both on the capital project side and on the ongoing maintenance and operation side. Most drainage maintenance to date has been funded through the road fund. And in the latest approved budget, a small amount of $177,000 was approved for drainage maintenance, but that was also to be shared with other functions and costs to support the Environmental Services Division of the Public Works Department. Another item I wanted to tell you about is that earlier this month, staff submitted 2 notices of interest to apply for hazard mitigation assistance grants through Cal, OES, and FEMA. One was for up to $100,000 toward the drainage master plan itself. The other was up to $10 million for localized flood reduction projects. And we found out earlier this week that our NOI for master plan funding has already been rejected. Cal OES staff noted that only local hazard mitigation plans are eligible for funding and that they would consider our master plan to be a standalone flood mitigation plan, which is not eligible. So we'll still be pursuing the other grant. If Cal OES affirms our eligibility for that, we'll put together a sub-application due at the beginning of October for their ranking and review and submission to FEMA for potential award. So this initial presentation, I know it's a lot of information. This initial presentation is meant to just start the discussion about our master plan and the funding issues that we're going to be faced with for drainage projects and operations and maintenance. So we intend to return to the commission at a later date when we have more results, initial results for you. And we also need to further discuss the funding shortfalls that we're going to have to pay for all of that work. We'll schedule that once we have those initial results, probably sometime in early 2018. So we have no specific recommendations at this time for funding, but we'd be happy to answer any questions or take down any suggestions or comments that you might have on the storm drain master plan.
I have a quick question, which is, to what extent is this development of the storm drain master plan tied to the State Water Board order in the next agenda item? Has this been something that's been in the works for quite some time? Or is this something that the city's realized, well, we ought to start thinking about this given the State Water Board's new requirements?
The storm drain master plan as a project has been on the books for quite a while. We would have needed to update the Southport drainage master plan anyway. But quite a while ago, we know that there's a lot of missing information for the north area, and we don't even really know exactly what's out there. And if we don't know what's out there, we don't know, is it the right capacity? Are we missing something? We really haven't been maintaining things too well. So we decided to combine the two and come up with the citywide master plan. That being said, again, we knew going into this that unlike the water and sewer master plans, there is no dedicated funding for storm drain. At this point in the legislature, the storm drain is not even considered a utility. So there's a lot going on. We are not the only jurisdiction facing any of those funding issues. Again, we decided early on that it also needed to address stormwater facilities where those overlap with drainage-related facilities. So there's a lot more going on with stormwater. There's a lot of outreach things that need to happen. But the things that this master plan will focus on are the physical drainage-related items like the trash capture devices, like drain inlet filters, bioswale maintenance where it's in the right-of-way, those kinds of things. So that's how they're intertwined.
I have a question, Wendy. If you could enlighten me, this might be a nominal part of imperviousness, but the issue of the urban forest, if there's any relationship with drainage, with the number of trees we have. I know West Sacramento has our Trees for Tomorrow program, which of course is focused on the north area. And if you could maybe just talk about that a little bit, if it is relevant, that we have, because also trees produce foliage and they lose their foliage, and there's also that drainage issue as well. That may come up in the next item. But if we could maybe see if there's some kind of relationship with, if homeowners are planting more trees, is that a positive effect? Is that a negative effect on absorption for storms? And then, of course, runoff at that point.
Well, you kind of hit on both sides of it anyway, where yes, trees can help with absorption and that portion of drainage and runoff and the water ecology cycle. However, leaves and other debris is not a good thing for storm drain systems in general. So there's positive and negative effects to planting more trees, and it really depends on where they're planted and how the system functions. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, no, it does, and to some degree. I just know the Trees for Tomorrow program is focused on the pollution burden aspect of planting trees and whether there's any consideration, because those are all tracked and monitored by CAL FIRE. So they get the GPS coordinates every time a tree is planted, and the owner of the tree is responsible for maintaining it and will pay the fee if there's anything that happens to that tree. But I guess the question becomes, is that part of the tracking? Because if urban forest impacts the drainage and the various other components you've talked about, then is the city apprised of any potential effect as trees get larger into the future? May not be as much of an issue when they're in their small size, and their canopies, as their canopies grow.
Right.
And we become this issue of runoff and blockage. Is the city then aware of where these new trees or, if there's any kind of effect that might, be compounding?
Right.
I'm just curious about that.
Well, to the extent that those new trees are planted in say a city park or, some other location where when they drop their leaves, it doesn't affect the drainage system, that's one thing.
Right.
So I'm not even sure, what locations they've identified or are identifying to place the trees, and that's something we should work with them to figure out.
Thank you.
I had a couple thoughts. Is this type of activity eligible for Proposition 1 water bond funding? For,
One.
so I know Proposition 1 water bond funding was made available a few years ago. I want to say there's some restrictions with regards to how, I know there's funding in there for stormwater, but this might be different. I know there's resources in there for recycling as it relates to that. Maybe this specific activity isn't eligible, but just a comment for staff to.
Okay. We'll definitely look into that one.
And then the rainfall assumptions, it notes here in 2009, so was that a drought year? Or do you know if that was a drought year?
I don't know whether that was a drought year or not. I think their rainfall data was from 2009 and backwards, so wasn't specifically just from 2009.
Oh, okay. So it was an average, so it's kind of
It
an
was
average
an
of.
average, yes.
Okay. No, just because it's been pretty erratic, right? It was really wet this year, and it was really dry for several years, so
Right.
however those assumptions come together for creating that average is pretty important to calculate what you're coming up with, so that was my other comment.
Okay.
That's what she's writing. Wendy, just there was a discrepancy between how the the land use map separated out roadways from the original methodology. Well, why did that? I don't understand enough about those metrics or how you come to this, I don't even know what you call this, these calculations, but why does that methodology not include streets when that's such an obviously significant portion overall?
I don't know that we actually thought about it in the context of a drainage master plan. When we were showing for existing development, we pulled the streets out and now we only show the land use on the adjacent parcels. I don't think we thought about it from that perspective. But the point is that we sort of need to put that back in just so that we can be consistent with how we would look at it from a future development point of view, where the roadways are included in the 341 acre parcel that's going to be developed.
Yeah.
So looking at the future development versus existing development, we just need to be consistent. I just don't think we thought about it.
I see. Thank you.
Any other comments or concerns?
I have a quick question. You were speaking about homeowners, so single-family residents, that they're not really monitored right now as far as, any changes they would make. With the numbers being so large, what kind of change would a homeowner have to make to where it would affect the numbers for the runoffs and for actually change the results of that? So if a homeowner was to do all cement in their whole backyard, or, what change would have to be that would actually affect the results that would be worth monitoring?
Well, if we're looking at increasing our low-density percentage to 55% for storm drain modeling, then to me, if they're over 55%, we have a problem.
Okay.
And like I said, we have the front yard rule right now, but at this point, we don't regulate what happens in the backyard. And I know there's plenty of single-family residents out there where it's mostly concrete.
Yeah, especially around pools or that kind
Exactly.
of. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I just have one comment. You had mentioned possibly doing something like a permit for if you're doing some sort of major concrete work at home. You might want to include in your plan some sort of outreach. I mean, just because that's something the homeowner's not going to think about. I wouldn't think about that. Like, if I were going to go and do concrete work in my front yard, I would just do it. So, that's something you would probably want to make sure that the community knows about, so.
Well, yeah, if.
And I didn't know about the 50% rule either. I mean, I've never changed my front yard, so it's been like that since probably the 50s, but yeah, it's something that the community would have to really get to know too. So they're not just getting fined and having no idea what's going on.
Right,
Yeah.
and, it would be something that we would work, through environmental services, if we decide to go that route. At this point, we're asking for your feedback. Is that a good idea, a bad idea? Could it use some tweaking, before we even, go down that path?
I think it's definitely doable. I mean, most people know, like, if they're gonna do some sort of construction on their home or get like a new sewer pipe or something like that, they need a permit, but I think you need to make sure that people are aware that that's a permittable activity rather than it just happening, because you're gonna get a lot of residents who won't do it. So,
Right.
I mean, you're still gonna get residents who won't do it, but I mean, if you have some sort of outreach, then that would be more feasible to have that kind of permitting system, so.
Right.
And it needs to be outreach that's not just posting it on the internet, because not everybody's gonna use it, especially people who've lived here for a long time and just do what, they're used to, the rules and regulations they're used to. so.
Right, yeah.
If I could make a suggestion also, would be why, because I'm thinking we did a lot of cement work at our home, but now that you're saying this, I'm like, well, wow, do we have a drainage problem now? Because I didn't even think of any of this. So, an education for the community to know why this is important and why it needs to be monitored and regulated.
Right.
I could also say the secondary component to that is the businesses who would put in the concrete or the drainage that generally goes along with permitted concrete work, but also the materials. We do have access to concrete and other materials that are made to allow water to go through. And sometimes the consumer is not aware of those options. And also that, again, the business side of that is whether the folks that maybe contract that out or hire someone to do that work, they have those options made available to them informationally as well. So the outreach component, could also be educational on both sides.
Right.
Business and consumer ends.
Good point.
Wendy, one last comment. The last paragraph in your staff report asks that this is meant to start discussion for funding strategies. Has the city ever looked into a city-initiated SCIP bond, statewide community infrastructure program bond?
I don't know that we've talked about that from a drainage perspective. But again, we still need to do the financing study anyway. And that's where I expect a lot of these ideas to come up, and we just wanted to wait until we actually had some idea of how much money are we talking about.
Yes, understood.
Before
Okay.
we started initiating that.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, thank you for a great report, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, number 4, consideration of compliance options for the statewide trash provisions to be implemented through the small municipal and separate storm sewer systems.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Paulina Benner, Environmental Services Manager. With this item, staff is seeking the Commission's support of a recommendation to the City Council that the city chooses Track 1 as our compliance option for the statewide trash provisions. These trash provisions were adopted in April of 2015 and are to be implemented through the city's MS4 permit. I'll just shorten it since Wendy already gave you what that stands for. The trash provisions that were adopted would establish, or have established, a statewide water quality objective for trash, a prohibition of trash discharges to surface waters of the United States, and defines priority land uses where trash controls will be required. Those priority land uses are defined in the trash provisions as high-density residential, which is 10 or more units per acre, industrial areas, commercial areas, mixed use, mixed urban, which is a combination of commercial and urban settings, as well as public transportation stations like bus stops and bus routes. The State Water Resources Control Board recently used its authority under Water Code Section 13383 to issue an order to all MS4 permittees, including the city, to begin development of a trash control program. That order also requires that the city select one of these two compliance options, as just track 1 or track 2. That order that I mentioned is in your attachments as attachment number 2, and that order describes in more detail what the city would be required to do. This is just our initial step in the process in deciding which track to select, and that'll be what we'll be talking about tonight. Track 1 is a requirement that would require the city to install, operate, and maintain full capture systems in the storm drain network located in our priority land use areas. Full capture systems are defined as a system that would capture trash down to 5 millimeters, so it's pretty small. Just want to make a point really quickly that leaves are not considered trash in this context. So it's other things like, food, packaging materials, and real trash, not leaves and things like that. Track 2 is a little bit different in that it requires a combination of both some full capture systems as well as multi-benefit projects, other treatment controls, and/or institutional controls that will reach full trash capture equivalency. And what that means is that you would have to have a combination of these things that would capture as much trash as if you had actually installed those full capture units in all of your priority land use areas. Our track selection and a preliminary map identifying our priority land use areas is due to the State Water Board by September 1st. Oh, is the PowerPoint? It was up a second ago. And it disappeared. I just have a couple of slides I wanted to show you. The first would be the priority land use map. Is that up on your screens?
Yes.
Oh, I just don't see it there. Okay. So I just wanted to show the map on a larger scale. So it's also included in that memo, so you can get an idea of where the majority of our priority land use areas are located. So this map illustrates in different colors the different types of priority land use areas. As you can tell, the majority are in the north area. So the storm drain master planning efforts that Wendy and her team are doing will be really important in deciding where we're going to install these full trash capture units. There's a table in our agenda report that shows this September 1st deadline and a future submittal deadline for both the tracks and illustrates the differences in between the two tracks and the submittal requirements. As you can see in track 2, there's a lot more that we'd have to submit by that December 1st deadline, including an implementation plan and some other information. To help the city with our initial evaluations for compliance options, Larry Walker Associates, which is a stormwater consulting firm that we selected to help us with MS4 compliance support, had completed a technical memorandum that's attachment 1 to your agenda report. Its author is Christine Cornelia. She's here today in the audience and will be available to answer any specific questions to that memo when I'm done with my presentation. And in that memo is the priority land use map that I mentioned. It's on your screen right now, as well as some preliminary cost estimates for track 1 compliance that the city can use in our considerations. While staff is currently recommending the city selects track 1 compliance method because track 1 provides a more clear understanding of compliance assurance, and we have a clearly defined cost estimates at this time. Compliance assurance is easier in that track 1 basically says you will install, maintain, and operate these full trash capture units in your priority areas. And once you've done that within the 10-year compliance timeline, you've met compliance. So it's pretty straightforward and pretty clear. It's a capital improvement project. We understand what that means. I have a couple of examples on this next slide that just kind of illustrate some of the types of units you could use. So there are, and they're numbered too, hydrodynamic separators. I mean, don't even ask me how to describe how these things work. Christine could probably help with that. There's gross solid removal devices, netting devices, and then the smaller pictures on the left-hand side is a connector pipe screen and some other baskets and screens that are actually installed in the drain inlets. Trash 2 compliance contains a lot more unknowns. It includes a variety of compliance components that I mentioned earlier. There's less information available to us about how much it would cost to actually implement those programs, and there's still some uncertainties about what the State Water Board will consider as sufficient ongoing monitoring to demonstrate compliance and that we're actually reaching that full capture equivalency. With regard to cost, we have some cost estimates that are established depending on the method used to create the estimates. In Table 4 in the memo, it describes the different types of methods used. There's a land-based, per capita, and then a method based on the number of units you would actually install in your catch basins. And those estimates vary between roughly $400,000 and $698,000 for the capital investment, and roughly $171,000 to $465,000 for annual O&M for installing and maintaining the different units. And that just depends on which cost estimate you use. And this next slide just illustrates a little, some of the connector pipe screens. This is the type of unit that we actually used for our Track 1 compliance cost estimates. And while this cost estimate is a little bit higher than the others, it's a more precise cost estimate than using the priority land or the per capita estimate, because it's based on real data. We understand how much these units cost. We know how many drain inlets the city has within our priority land use areas, so it's a more precise number. While the estimates used to come up with the per capita and the land coverage cost estimates are based on statewide data. Most of that was developed several years ago and isn't specific to West Sacramento data. So that's really what we're looking at right now, is the potential cost to install these connector pipe screens within our drain inlets. That cost could change if, upon further analysis, we see that, based on the way our system is constructed, we could actually install a larger type of a unit further downstream that would collect from multiple drain inlets. And that will be part of the process that we do over the next 18 months. And in closing, again, we're recommending that for now, the city does select Track 1 with the understanding that we could switch to Track 2 in the future if we find that upon further analysis of our system, we can't actually install full capture units everywhere we need to. And based on understanding from the Water Board staff, that is acceptable, that we can switch our selection in the future. And before the next submittal deadline of December 1st, we will do more analysis to determine where we can actually install those full capture units within our priority land use areas. And we'll also be working with Wendy and her team and our finance staff to identify funding sources, because, again, this is something that the city doesn't have a dedicated funding source to pay for that capital investment to install these units throughout the city. Fortunately, we do have 10 years, so we have some time to come up with money over the next decade. But it is still a significant amount of money, and it's important to note that these figures, these estimates are in today's dollars. So there's an assumption that those numbers are going to change over this next decade. So we'll have to really focus on finding some identified ongoing funding to pay for this cost. With that, Christine and I will both be here to answer any questions that you have.
I have a few questions and a comment, and the comment with respect to the staff report. This is a pretty regulatorily complicated area, and I do a little bit of work in this field, and I still had to go back and read this a bunch of different times and try and figure out what was going on here. So I think for future staff reports in this subject area, it would be helpful to have a little more background on this Clean Water Act and what these permits do and how they work. That's just a general comment. And then I have a couple questions. So the MS4 permit is the one that is the permit that regulates discharges to waters of the United States, correct?
Correct.
And then at some point after that permit was issued, the State Water Board adopted these trash provisions but did not include them in the text of the permit and is not planning to do so anytime soon?
Correct, yeah. So in lieu of actually amending the existing 2013 permit, they used their authority under the Clean Water Act to issue that 13383 notice.
And that's yeah. And so their authority to issue this particular order is specifically under 13383, that section of the Water Code. I'm just wondering legal has taken a look at this, because when I look at that section, it talks about monitoring and inspection and record keeping, and it doesn't have it doesn't have anything to say about actually implementing these full capture systems that are contemplated by the trash provisions and aren't included in the permit. And then you combine that with a short timeline, I think it's what, June, the letter was dated June 1st? And then
Right.
goes to
They give you
September,
90
so you have
days.
3 months to plan, and you know, that really doesn't give you much of a choice in terms of track one or track two. And you haven't gotten a lot of guidance from the state water board. So I guess I'm curious, one, if legal has looked at this, and two, whether there's been any thought of receiving an extension. And I appreciate that the water board staff have said that you can switch to track two later, but,
Right.
you know, it's worth about a nickel going forward, so I think it's, I'm a little concerned that this timeframe has been so short, that these provisions haven't ever made it into the permit, that the city is going to face, you know, pretty significant cost to install full capture system. And in the meantime, as we've heard, we don't even know what the drainage situation is like in the north area. So
Right.
the timeframe is a little concerning, and there seem to be some irregularities with the way the water board has moved forward on this.
We haven't had the city's legal counsel review this, but I do know that the California Stormwater Quality Association is heavily involved in these provisions and has worked with the state board and the regional boards on this issue. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, because we talked about that, or a conversation happened around the idea of asking for an extension on this first initial step, and the consensus was, you know, it wasn't going to work. I don't know if you recall any of that conversation. There's a button on the side there, little gray button. Thanks.
I know that CASQA, the California Association of Stormwater Quality Agencies, had a work group that was working with the state board, and I believe that they had lawyers involved in those meetings. So I haven't heard of any issues with implementing 13383 to require cities and municipalities to work on this timeline. And I just wanted to add that while the June 1st timeline to September 1st is very short, we've been watching these provisions come down the pike for the last several years. Probably in around 2013, 2014, we've started negotiating and reviewing drafts, so we've known it's coming, which is why we've been working with Paulina all this calendar year, pretty much, to start thinking about what the city might want to do.
I have a question. So is the oversight agency the state board or the regional board on this? Is it going to be, that's going to actually enforce the new regulations?
Well, the State Water Board ultimately looks to the regional, in this case, it would be the Central Valley
Right,
Regional Water Quality
yeah.
Control Board, to actually monitor compliance. But the overarching regulatory body would be the State Water Resources Control Board.
Okay, I just know that I work with them a lot, and sometimes it's the state enforcement versus the regional enforcement, so I was just wondering.
That's my understanding, is that correct? I
And-
think my understanding is correct. That's how we'd be working on this.
For the Phase 2 communities, it would be the state board.
Okay.
That's the overarching, though the Central Valley will be involved with it.
Okay.
But since the Phase 2 small municipality permit is overseen by the state, they're
So-
the ones that are in charge of the Phase 2.
Okay, because
Trash.
I'm just bringing that up because in your memo, you talk about some of the devices that have been approved from like LA and San Francisco regional boards, and I was just wondering if you had done any outreach to the Central Valley Board to see if there's like a preferred method that they have for these systems, because in my experience, none of them like to do the same thing, and they don't like it when you say, well, this other board does this, and they say, I don't care. So
Right.
that's just my experience working with them quite a bit, so.
Right. Well, I know that the state has said in the trash amendments and in the letters that the devices from LA and San Francisco Bay, those are grandfathered in. So
Okay.
everybody has to allow those ones
Okay.
at
that's
this time.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
And the state has also established a website specific to this that has all of the certified units that you can use. So they actually have a list from which you can select. They've said that those were certified, I guess.
So I didn't really need the clarification that leaves are not trash, but I am wondering if they all go through the same screening system.
They do, which is why O&M costs for these units can be pretty high. Is that every time you have a leaf drop season, you have to continuously clear these units of both leaves and true trash. One of the things, you were asking about trees earlier, one of the things that we've done throughout the years is tried to provide a lot of outreach to our residents who have a lot of street trees or trees on their property to, manage their leaves, make sure they use their yard waste containers, make sure they keep them out of the storm drain inlets and try to help us out. We do our best that we can with cleaning them, but if the actual owner of the tree can also take part in that process and keep their leaves swept up and put in their yard waste containers, that's always helpful. So that's something that we do for outreach and education in that area.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I have a 200-year-old valley oak in my front yard, which of course is rather large and produces a lot of leaves. But yeah, in the fall, it's a constant
Lot of work.
upkeep. But even though I'm a renter, not all renters view that as their prerogative or that I understand why the outreach is necessary, in other words, that some folks may see it as, well, it's not trash, so what's the harm? It's green, they're leaves, they're, biodegradable, or et cetera. So some people may not understand visually the way the system works, and therefore maybe the educational component is definitely going to maybe bridge that gap of understanding that it may not be trash, but it all goes into the same system. Thanks.
If leaves are a big deal for this question, are they, like proportionately, would they add 30% of blockage? I don't know, I'm looking for some sort of number, I don't know what it is, but if it's a large enough proportion of the problem clogging with these new systems, and forgive my ignorance on this, but I don't know, is there some sort of city policy that we can adopt that doesn't allow people to blow all their leaves into the street the way they seem to do? Or is
We
that
actually
already in
do,
place?
we do have an ordinance in place that prohibits people from blowing their leaves and their grass clippings into the street, because that's actually considered an illicit discharge. Whether it's easily enforced or not is a whole nother question, but yeah, a city ordinance does prohibit that practice.
So there's no other way to, okay.
Yeah, but I
Thinking
don't-
out loud. Excuse me,
Percentages wise,
yeah.
we haven't done any specific studies. One of the things that with track 1 compliance, you don't have to do any assessments, whereas with track 2, you actually have to go out and do some land-based assessments of how much trash you really have in your streets, and then set a baseline, and then continue to monitor by doing assessments twice a year. So it has a lot of work associated with that, but with trash 1 compliance, it would just be a matter of, we would learn throughout the years as our systems require maintenance, and our staff would actually be able to inform us on as to how much they're actually pulling, how much is leaves, and how much is trash. But until we actually start installing, we won't know that data specifically.
We've done a few analyses of street sweeping effectiveness and what is actually being picked up by the street sweepers, and have found that it does range, but in some studies, it's been only 1 to 10% of what is picked up is trash, and the rest is organic material, grass clippings, leaves. So it's a lot.
I was going to mention, so ultimately, this improves the water quality, what gets discharged. So same comment, maybe I know that there's a bond, and there's conversations of other bonds, I don't know if they're going to happen, but in terms of resources for the capital costs, it looks like a minuscule amount comparatively. So, maybe Proposition 1 funding is available for smaller cities.
Right.
I don't know if that's something that.
Well, I believe the Prop 1 funding you're talking about requires that you have a stormwater resources management plan, if that's the right term. And we are working with Yolo County. The county is developing a plan for the entire county and the cities within. So when we will have opportunities to add projects to that plan, and that will then give us the eligibility for that Prop 1 stormwater funding.
And then, kind of a simple question. This track 1 and the components, it's been tested, it's been used, it doesn't cause flooding. I mean, I'm just looking at what it does, and it captures, I know in the rural areas, I mean, there's a lot of culverts, and they get plugged, and these pipes get plugged, and the roads get overrun with water. So, I mean, this stuff has been tested, this approach.
It has been tested a lot, especially in the Bay Area and Southern California. And I think in some of the initial tests, there was some flooding. A lot of the vendors have adapted their designs to make sure that there's a good overflow system on the devices that are installed. So if leaf litter does build up or actual trash does build up, it's going to bypass the system to avoid flooding. Vector control has also been a concern because sometimes there's water that ponds. So the manufacturers have also started incorporating that in their designs, O&M procedures, and just the design of the devices to limit that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the comment I have is, would it be fair to say track 1 is relying on local expertise, whereas track 2 is relying on state average data? And if that's what I heard you describe it as correctly?
For cost estimates, I was talking about state average data.
Right.
And that's actually for track 1 cost estimates. Track 2 cost estimates and just compliance in general are a little bit vaguer. And for me, one of my concerns as the stormwater permit coordinator is that because of all of the unknowns with track 1 with regard to staffing levels, it could be things like, having to do those land-based assessments take a lot of time. It's not really clear how many other components, like how many institutional controls will we need to implement, like an anti-litter campaign. Would we need to have enhanced street sweeping, and how much will that cost if we do that? So at this juncture, we're selecting track 1 because it's a little bit clearer to us what that means. Track 2 has a lot of ambiguities, and it could be more money. At this point, it's an unknown.
So there's risk involved that...
That's a good way to put it, yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, thank you for,
Mr. Chairman, we are asking for a motion to support staff's recommendation to City Council.
all right, I motion yes on this. Go with the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Second, I guess.
All right. There. All right, motion approved. Yep. There you go. Ask for a vote? All right. Anybody want that? All in?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion moved. All right, next item on the list is General Administration Function, Environmental and Utilities Commission calendar.
Monday, October 9th, and the one following that is Monday, December 11th.
Okay.
October 9th.
October 9th and December 11th. Any other reports from the city staff?
Not at this time.
Or any other future agenda item requests by the commissioners? All right, I adjourn the meeting.